Okay, let me tell you about Brenda and the penguins. Well, not actual penguins, probably. I didn't check the specific coordinates for penguin habitation, but the story definitely involves Brenda, our HOA president from hell, and a meticulously crafted set of travel instructions to the icy bottom of the world. It all started, as these suburban nightmares often do, with my backyard. My backyard isn't anything special, really. Patch of grass, couple of questionable rose bushes, a slightly ramshackle shed where I tinker on my bike and hide from adult responsibilities. Maybe the shed is technically 6 inches taller than the official HOA height limit for detached accessory structures if you measure from the absolute peak of the roof gable and don't account for ground settling. Who's measuring that closely? Stan Mirov from the Architectural Review Committee, probably on his nightly rounds with a laser level and a copy of the bylaws. But mostly, it's my sanctuary. My little kingdom of slightly overgrown weeds and questionable DIY projects. My gate is usually locked, not because I'm hiding anything more sinister than a rusty lawnmower, but because I just value my privacy. Apparently, in the eyes of Brenda, HOA president and self-appointed queen of all she surveys, valuing privacy is deeply suspicious behavior. I was out there one Tuesday afternoon, enjoying a rare moment of peace, attempting to assemble a bird feeder that seemed to have more parts than a space shuttle, when I sensed it. That prickle on the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I glanced up towards the fence line. Sure enough, there was Brenda, peering over the top of the shared fence like a particularly judgmental meerkat. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second before she ducked back down. Subtle, Brenda. Real subtle. I sighed and went back to deciphering the bird feeder instructions. Step 7. Insert flange C into slot D while simultaneously rotating widget a counterclockwise? Seriously? 10 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Guess who? Brenda stood on my porch, clutching a manila envelope like it contained state secrets, or possibly anthrax. She wore her usual expression of pinched disapproval, as if my very existence slightly soured the air she breathed. "Mr. Henderson," she began, skipping any pleasantries like hello or nice weather we're having. "A matter has come to the board's attention requiring immediate clarification." "Okay," I said slowly, bracing myself. "What matter might that be, Brenda?" "Concerns have been raised," she announced, puffing herself up slightly, "regarding activities and structures on the rear portion of your property. Specifically," she waved vaguely towards my backyard, "back there." "Activities and structures?" I repeated. "Like assembling this incredibly complex bird feeder? Or the shed? What concerns?" "As HOA president," she continued, ignoring my question, "it is my duty, and indeed my right according to the bylaws, to ensure all properties are maintained in accordance with community standards. Therefore, I need to schedule a time to access your rear property for a compliance inspection." I blinked. "Access? My backyard? To inspect what exactly? Did someone file a specific complaint? Is there a violation notice I should know about?" Brenda sniffed dismissively. "It's a routine check, Mr. Henderson. Standard procedure. Bylaw 18.4 clearly allows the board, or its designated representative," she tapped her chest meaningfully, "access for maintenance verification and standards review. I need to ensure everything back there," she gestured vaguely again, "is up to code." My internal alarm bells started ringing. I knew Bylaw 18.4. I'd read the cursed CC and Rs cover to cover during a previous, equally tedious dispute about the approved shade of mailbox paint. "Bylaw 18.4, I said carefully, if I recall correctly, primarily discusses access to common areas, utility easements running through properties, or access required for specific necessary maintenance after proper notice. It doesn't grant the HOA president carte blanche to wander around my private, fenced backyard for a routine check, without specifying what standard is allegedly being violated. What specific code are you investigating, Brenda? Her lips thinned. It is my duty to ensure overall compliance, Mr. Henderson. I don't need to justify routine inspections to you. I need access to the property. Provide me with available times by the end of the week, or the board will be forced to consider further action, including potential fines for non-cooperation. Unless you can cite the specific bylaw granting you that authority for a general inspection without cause, and follow the proper notification procedure outlined within that bylaw, I replied, keeping my voice calm but firm. I'm afraid I can't accommodate that request right now, Brenda. My backyard is private property. Brenda gasped, as if I'd slapped her with a wet fish. Non-cooperation, obstructing HOA duties. This will be noted, Mr. Henderson. This will be formally noted. She clutched her manila envelope tighter, spun on her heel, and marched stiffly down my walkway, radiating indignation. Okay, I thought, closing the door. So that's how we're playing it? Time to reread the bylaws. Again. And just as I remembered, Bylaw 18.4 was clear as mud on some things, but crystal clear that access to private property, not common areas or easements, required either homeowner consent or a specific documented reason related to maintaining common elements or reasonable suspicion of a specific violation, after written notice and an opportunity for the homeowner to fix it. It absolutely did not say, Brenda gets to conduct random fishing expeditions in your backyard because she's bored and suspicious. I drafted a polite but firm email to the entire HOA board, CCing Brenda, quoting Bylaw 18.4 verbatim. I requested clarification on the specific nature of the routine inspection, the exact standard allegedly requiring verification, and the procedural justification for demanding access under the rules they supposedly operated under. The response, which arrived suspiciously quickly and was clearly written by Brenda herself, despite being signed the HOA board, was a masterpiece of bureaucratic deflection. It completely ignored my questions about specific bylaws and procedures, simply reiterating the president's authority to conduct inspections and the homeowner's obligation to cooperate. It ended with a passive-aggressive flourish. We trust you will reconsider your position and provide requested access, times promptly to avoid unnecessary escalation. Unbelievable, I muttered, reading the email for the third time. She's just making it up as she goes along. What's unbelievable? Asked Chloe over the phone later that evening, after I'd recounted the latest salvo in the war of Brenda's backyard access. She's completely ignoring the actual rules, I fumed. She just keeps demanding access to the property like it's her God-given right. I sent her the specific bylaw, asked for the specific reason, and she just replies with, because I'm president and I said so, basically. Sounds about right for Brenda, Chloe sighed. She once tried to fine me because the squirrels buried nuts too close to her prize-winning azaleas, claimed they were undermining the root structure in a non-compliant manner. So what do I do? I asked. Just let her stomp around my shed looking for violations that probably don't exist? You could file a harassment complaint, Chloe suggested. Or just keep quoting the bylaws back at her until she gets bored. I don't think Brenda gets bored, I said grimly, especially not when she thinks someone is defying her. My prediction proved accurate. The official letters started arriving. First, a second notice, request for property access. Then a final notice, failure to grant property access for compliance verification. This one explicitly threatened daily fines of $50 for obstructing HOA duties if I didn't provide access times within 5 business days. It still didn't mention why she needed access or under what specific rule. Just the demand. Access, Now. Chloe, she's lost her mind, I practically yelled into the phone, waving the latest letter. She's threatening massive fines. Still won't say why she needs access, just that I have to provide unfettered access by Friday. Unfettered! What does she think I'm hiding back there? A black market gnome smuggling operation? A secret llama farm? Okay, maybe the llama farm, Chloe quipped. But seriously, Mark, this is harassment. You need to talk to a lawyer. Maybe, I conceded. But you know how the board is. They're terrified of Brenda. They'll just rubber stamp whatever she wants. Arguing feels pointless. She just keeps demanding. Access to the property. Provide information on how to gain access. I stopped mid-rant. An idea, terrible and beautiful, sparked in my brain. Mark? Chloe prompted after a moment of silence. You still there? What are you thinking? Please tell me it doesn't involve actual llamas. No, I said slowly, a grin spreading across my face, audible even over the phone. No llamas, but she wants access to the property? Information on how to gain access? Okay, I think I can provide that. If Brenda wanted to be vague about which property needed accessing, who was I to assume she meant mine? And if she wanted information on how to gain access? Well, information I could provide. Detailed information, meticulously researched information, just maybe not for the property located at 123 Maple Lane. Out came the laptop. Google Maps, satellite view. I scrolled and scrolled, past continents, over oceans, until I found it. A suitably remote, desolate, and utterly irrelevant patch of white. Somewhere on the vast, featureless expanse of the East Antarctic ice sheet. Perfect. Coordinates noted. 78 degrees south, 106 degrees east. Looked lovely. Probably needed inspection. Now, how does one access this prime piece of real estate? Time for some serious research. Icebreaker schedules, Antarctic logistics providers, polar survival gear requirements, treaty system protocols, environmental impact statements. My browser history started to look like I was planning an actual polar expedition, not just an elaborate act of bureaucratic revenge. The plan solidified. I would create the ultimate access packet. Official-looking, ridiculously detailed, and utterly useless for inspecting my possibly non-compliant garden shed. The next few evenings were dedicated to Operation Antarctica. This couldn't be just a joke. It had to be art. Performance art delivered via certified mail. I downloaded templates for formal letters and government reports. I found high-resolution satellite imagery of the chosen coordinates. Spoiler, it looked like white. I fired up my word processor and began crafting the masterpiece. First, the cover letter, printed on heavy bond paper using a formal font. Dear President Brenda, last name. Pursuant to your repeated requests dated, I listed the dates of her threatening letters, regarding the urgent need for access to the property requiring inspection. Please find enclosed comprehensive information, protocols, and required documentation pertaining to gaining said access. The enclosed materials detail the necessary steps, authorizations, equipment, and logistical considerations for accessing the subject property. We trust this detailed information fulfills the board's requirements under Bylaw 19.2, Access and Egress Protocols. I made up that bylaw number, sounded official, and facilitates your necessary compliance verification. Sincerely, Mark Henderson, Compliant Homeowner. Signed with an unnecessarily elaborate flourish. Next, the map. A beautiful, color, high-resolution satellite map of Antarctica, printed on glossy photo paper. A bright red circle highlighted a tiny, insignificant speck near the coordinates 78 degrees S, 106 degrees E, labeled Subject Property Location Requiring Inspection. Then, the pièce de résistance, the Access Protocol and Logistics Document, a multi-page document formatted like a government report, complete with sections and subsections. Section 1. Preliminary Travel Arrangements. Detailed steps on booking passage via specialized polar vessel, icebreaker class required. To McMurdo Station, Antarctica. Included estimated costs and booking lead times, minimum 6 months recommended. Section 2. On-site transportation. Options for chartering tracked vehicles, Haglunds recommended, or helicopter transport from McMurdo to base camp near subject coordinates. Emphasized need for experienced polar guides and backup GPS systems. Section 3. Final approach and access. Instructions for navigating the final one. 2 kilometers from base camp via skis or snowshoes, using GPS and potentially ice axes depending on terrain. Crevasse risk noted as moderate. Defined access as reaching the precise GPS coordinates. Section 4. Inspection window. Clearly stated, property accessible for inspection only during brief Antarctic summer season, approximate November-February, weather and ice conditions permitting. Daylight is 24 hours during this period, facilitating thorough inspection. Followed by the appendices. Appendix A, required travel authorizations and permits, filled with fake but incredibly official-looking forms referencing the Antarctic Treaty System, environmental protection protocols, and fictional permits like the Polar Property Inspection Visa, PPIV. Appendix B, mandatory gear and equipment list. This was my favorite part. Included standard polar gear, thermal suits, insulated boots, goggles, crampons, plus increasingly absurd items, satellite phone, prepaid plan not included, emergency rations, minimum 30 days, high-intensity flare gun, portable waste containment system, mandatory, signal mirror, avalanche probe, and my personal touch, polar bear deterrent spray, extra strength. Yes, I know there are no polar bears in Antarctica. That was the point. Appendix C, Health and Safety Advisory. Warnings about extreme cold, crevasses, whiteout conditions, potential equipment failure, psychological effects of isolation, and the lack of nearby emergency services, nearest hospital, several thousand miles, and an icebreaker away. Advised a thorough physical and psychological evaluation prior to attempting access. Okay, I thought, reviewing the hefty document. Needs one more touch. I took the notarized cover letter. Yes, I actually got it notarized. The look on the notary's face was worth the $10. And assembled the entire packet, map, protocol, appendices into a thick, professional-looking presentation folder. Then, I placed it all inside a large manila envelope, addressed it to President Brenda, last name, Elmwood Park HOA Board, and sealed it. For extra flair, I melted some red crayon wax and made a pseudo-official seal using the bottom of a bottle cap. Perfect. Now, delivery. Handing it to her felt too confrontational. Leaving it on her porch felt anticlimactic. No, this masterpiece deserved the cold, impersonal validation of the United States Postal Service. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Maximum bureaucratic absurdity. I took the packet to the post office, feeling like a spy dispatching coded secrets. The postal clerk weighed the thick envelope. "Wow," she commented. "Looks important. Sending architectural plans?" "Something like that," I replied non-committally. "Access protocols." I paid the extra for certified mail and tracking, pocketing the receipt like it was a winning lottery ticket. The next few days were filled with delicious anticipation. I checked the USPS tracking website obsessively. Out for delivery. Then, finally, delivered, Left with individual, 10:15 a.m. She had it. Oh, to be a fly on the wall in Brenda's meticulously tidy, beige-toned living room at that exact moment. I pictured her, perhaps sipping her weak morning tea, seeing the certified letter, feeling a surge of triumph. He finally caved. He scheduled the inspection, signing for it with a flourish, sitting down in her armchair, slitting open the envelope with a smug sense of victory. And then, pulling out the map of Antarctica. The confusion, the furrowed brow, pulling out the access protocol, reading about icebreakers, about crampons, about polar bear deterrent. The slow dawning realization, the shift from confusion to disbelief, then to sputtering incandescent rage. Did she throw it? Did she scream? Did she immediately dial the HOA lawyer, shrieking about penguins and glaciers? I could only imagine. And the imagining was glorious. My phone rang about an hour later. Caller ID, Brenda HOA President. I let it go to voicemail, a wide grin spreading across my face. The message she left was a thing of beauty, a sputtering aria of pure fury. "Henderson!" shriek. "I received your packet." Gasping sounds. "Antarctica? Are you completely insane? This is a mockery, a travesty. This is insubordination of the highest order. I demanded access to the property requiring inspection, not a blooming polar expedition guide. You will be fined. You will be sanctioned. You will rue the day you sent me a map to a penguin colony." Click. Penguin colony? Bless her heart, she didn't even check the coordinates. Definitely no penguins there, just ice. Lots and lots of ice. The official fallout was swift. An emergency HOA board meeting was called for the following evening via frantic email blast. Subject: urgent matter regarding homeowner compliance and inappropriate correspondence. I was, of course, summoned to attend. I arrived promptly, dressed respectfully, carrying my notarized copy of the cover letter and the entire duplicate Antarctica access packet in a neat binder. Brenda was already there, flanked by the other two board members, Dave, who still looked half asleep, and Janice, who looked terrified. Brenda's face was mottled with rage, and she was waving my map of Antarctica like a battle standard. "Explain this, Mr. Henderson," she demanded the moment I sat down, slamming the map onto the table. "We demanded access for a compliance inspection, and you send this. Instructions on how to charter a helicopter to the South Pole." I adopted an expression of mild confusion. "President Brenda, board members," I began calmly. "I received multiple written demands," I slid copies across the table, "requesting access to the property requiring inspection and further demanding information on how to gain said access. These demands, as you can see, unfortunately failed to specify the street address or parcel number of the property in question." I paused, letting that sink in. "Therefore," I continued, "in a spirit of full cooperation and adherence to the board's request for detailed access information, I provided a comprehensive packet outlining the necessary protocols, authorizations, equipment, and logistical considerations for accessing a property requiring inspection. As you can see from the enclosed materials," I gestured towards my binder, "the instructions are quite thorough and meticulously researched." Dave blinked slowly. Janice looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. "But Antarctica," Janice whispered. "A remote location, yes," I acknowledged gravely. Perhaps reflecting the inherent difficulties sometimes associated with gaining access, particularly when the initial requests lack specificity. I simply endeavored to provide the most complete access information possible based on the demands received. I trust the packet fulfills the board's requirement for access protocols. Brenda looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. "This is ridiculous! You are mocking this board. You are obstructing justice. You deliberately sent me on a wild goose chase to the bottom of the world. I merely complied, quite literally, with the vague demands I received. I countered mildly. Perhaps future requests for property access could include a specific street address, cite the relevant bylaw authorizing the inspection, and follow the established procedure? Just for clarity's sake, of course. The board was stunned into silence. They couldn't actually fault the packet itself without admitting their initial demands were improperly vague. Brenda sputtered about fines for the original failure to grant access, which they did levy, but the Antarctica gambit itself? They had no rule for that. The meeting ended awkwardly, with Brenda shooting daggers at me and the other board members avoiding my gaze. The story, inevitably, leaked. The legend of the Antarctica access packet spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People I barely knew would give me knowing winks or ask, "Heard you're planning a trip south, Mark?" Brenda became, according to Chloe, affectionately known as Admiral Byrd or Captain Scott behind her back. Stan Mirov actually asked me, with a completely straight face, if I'd finished winterizing my property yet. The sheer deadpan absurdity of my response had somehow short-circuited their outrage, leaving mostly bewildered amusement in its wake. Brenda, predictably, tried to retaliate. The HOA lawyer sent letters demanding access to the correct property, 123 Maple Lane, citing clarified procedures. My lawyer friend sent back polite refusals, arguing the entire process was tainted by the previous harassment and improper demands, referencing the Antarctica packet as Exhibit A for HOA overreach. It devolved into a legal stalemate. She never did get access to my backyard. The shed, possibly 6 inches too tall, remained uninspected. The HOA eventually rewrote the bylaws regarding property access, adding paragraphs of excruciatingly specific detail about notice periods, required documentation, and probable cause, rules. Brenda hated because they clipped her wings. I considered it a victory for privacy, common sense, and the strategic application of polar geography. Brenda avoids me now. If we pass on the street, she looks straight ahead, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. Sometimes, though, I wonder, does she still have the packet? Did she ever actually look up flights to McMurdo Station? Probably not, but the thought still makes me smile. Sometimes the best way to deal with someone demanding access to your space is to give them directions to the biggest, coldest, most inaccessible space you can find.